urgent bomb on target. The Russians walked into a Ukrainian ambush. Our forces hit the jackpot. The Kremlin's elite troops have been crushed. The enemy has lost its best forces. Moscow is nervous. The air and the front lines of Ukraine are charged up. A fierce retaliation has begun. A mysterious weapon bursts onto the scene. It will be tested in battle for the first time. The training grounds are on standby. Our forces did it. They turned the tide of events. The army's production capabilities have never been like this before. The HIMARS struck and Donbas went dark because of it. Reinforcements are heading to the Ukrainian Armed Forces and the enemy has gone quiet. All this in our episode Hell Point. This is a triumph for the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The enemy elite collapsed in an instant. Our forces delivered a crushing blow. The power of vengeance worked to the fullest. The Kremlin's top military leaders are finished. Putin no longer has special forces. Ukrainian defenders have made Moscow tremble. At last, this was their military pride, and now it has vanished into oblivion. The dictator now faces the failure of the year and is forced to make a choice. Will he be able to revive the remnants of his regime, or is it time to say goodbye to the lost units? More on this in just a moment.
Over 3,000 kilometers. That is the current length of the front line between Ukraine and Russia. Of that, nearly 1,000 kilometers are active combat zones. Hundreds of kilometers where Ukrainian defenders are breaking the backbone of an army that was once called the second strongest in the world every single day. And every meter of this line is a story of courage, loss, and unbreakable will. At this frontier, not only columns of equipment and infantry are being destroyed, but also Russia's military elite. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian fighters have eliminated dozens of special forces operatives from the elite Senezh and Kubinka units, those whom in Russia they call the elite of the elite.
Losses of such fighters are especially painful for Russia. Each of them is not just an ordinary soldier, but a specialist who has undergone years of training. Training a single officer like this takes years and requires significant resources.
Recently, a documentary film about the elimination of the sabotage and reconnaissance group of the Special Purpose Center Sinish, which operated in the Chernihiv region, was released to the public. This operation became one of the most effective since the beginning of the full-scale war. Ukrainian intelligence officers from the 54th Separate Reconnaissance Battalion, together with border guards from the 105th Detachment named after Prince Volodymyr the Great, eliminated 6 enemy officers. The bodies of those killed, as well as weapons and equipment, were seized.
They enter Ukrainian territory with GoPro cameras turned on, and they record all their activities. Activities, if you can call them that, killings, sabotage. This is essentially terror. And first they show this to their perhaps commanders or superiors to report back, yes, that's the first thing. And secondly, they post all of this material online for others to see. In doing so, they aim to intimidate people. There are even videos with titles such as "How I Spent That Summer." These videos are compilations of graphic and disturbing killings, content that may be upsetting. Of Ukrainians, Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian civilians.
The Sinish and Kubinka centers, key units of the Russian Federation's Special Operations Forces, directly subordinate to the General Staff. It is there that the best of the best are selected, those who are supposed to carry out the most complex, covert, and dangerous missions. They are trained using Western methods and deployed in operations outside the country, from Ukraine to Africa. But in Ukraine, even such an elite proved powerless. Those whom Moscow calls invisible fighters become visible on Ukrainian fields.
Hold it, just wait, I've got it. Please get out.
According to the I Want to Live project, during the war, Ukraine has eliminated at least 58 fighters from Russian Special Operations Forces, the GRU and the FSB. For the enemy's army, these are not just losses. This is a blow to the core personnel, to those who were supposed to conduct reconnaissance, coordinate operations, and prepare new sabotage missions. And while Russian propaganda continues to talk about high-precision weapons and the professionalism of its army, the reality is completely different. On a front line stretching over 3,000 kilometers, Ukraine is not only holding the line, but is also systematically eliminating those whom the Kremlin considers untouchable. And no matter how long the enemy wages this aggression, the defense forces will always give the same answer: intruders. On Ukrainian soil, you will not survive.
Now that's what I call a breakthrough. Ukraine is preparing both the skies and the front for a strike. Swedish Gripen fighter jets are bursting in with unprecedented zeal. Legendary American helicopters are arriving, the Pearl program. Zelensky's plan for 50% of the front under Ukrainian control is starting, and it is becoming increasingly realistic. The combat power of the Ukrainian Armed Forces is reaching a new level. The enemy is holding its breath. The countdown has begun. Are strikes really imminent that will make even Putin's head spin? The answer to this question is coming up in the next segment. Ukraine is preparing to tear up the skies. Sweden and Ukraine have signed an agreement on cooperation in the development of air capabilities.
Many years of cooperation and many years of prospects for equipping our Air Force with modern technological weaponry. But most importantly, this makes it possible to receive up to 150 combat aircraft, Gripen jets as early as next year. You could say it's a direct competitor, a serious rival to the latest upgrades of the American F-16. And acquiring these aircraft, this is an impressively high-quality upgrade for Ukraine's armed forces. The number of Gripen jets we're counting on, 100 to 150 units, is exactly the right amount to replenish our armed forces. On the other hand, this is neither a short-term nor even a medium-term prospect. Meanwhile, the Belgian Minister of Defense stated that the country will be able to provide Ukraine with fighter jets, F-16s, but also not before next year. So what we will be receiving from our partners in the future is what has already been promised. They carry out maintenance and repairs on all these aircraft and conduct on-site inspections as needed. Regarding the readiness to transfer these aviation assets to Ukraine, and in the future this will continue to be transferred, but again, this is not state-of-the-art equipment. Now, new helicopters will replace the old ones. Officially, Ukraine has begun purchasing attack and transport helicopters from the legendary American company Bell. This acquisition is an important step for Ukraine as it aims to modernize its military and improve its defense capabilities. Bell, known for its long history and expertise in aviation, produces helicopters that are trusted by armed forces around the world. The helicopters being purchased will help Ukraine enhance both its offensive operations and its ability to transport troops and equipment efficiently. These helicopters have much higher operating costs and, in particular, possess better capabilities when it comes to intercepting aerial targets. Rudy also stated that weapons worth several $1 billion for the Ukrainian military have already been sent from the US, funded by allies. Overall, by the end of 2025, at least preliminarily, the volume of possible deliveries has been allocated. According to contracts and procurements, this amounts to $10 billion. So overall, this is still only about 1/5 of what we could potentially receive. The pace is actually quite decent. The main thing is that this process has started. This process is underway, and I think Donald Trump will be pleased with it, since he is a businessman. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky announced that by the end of the year, the front should be supplied with at least 50% Ukrainian-made weaponry. This is now the goal set for the defense industry. But is this actually realistic? If we want to reach the volumes the president of Ukraine is talking about, then certain measures must be taken, relevant legislative acts, to support the defense industrial complex. Otherwise, these figures will be unattainable. The president's priorities also include meetings with European leaders, preparing new defense agreements, and strengthening combat aviation.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukraine never ceases to impress. In the Kremlin, they try to imagine that this is working out for them. But no, it isn't. The rout of enemy forces is about to happen in reality. Meanwhile, ours are ready. Weapon production is running like clockwork. Naval drones, long-range missiles, and artillery systems. And that's far from the full list of what, right at this moment, is knocking the ground out from under the enemy, from under the enemy's feet. The world is applauding the Ukrainian defense industry. What other decisive steps might Kyiv take any moment now? We'll tell you about this in our report, coming up next.
The Ukrainian defense industry is ramping up its efforts. Ukraine is becoming a world leader in weapons production.
Europe must help Ukraine become a steel porcupine that no aggressor can overcome.
The security service of Ukraine has demonstrated new Sea Baby maritime drones, which have already been tested in combat. The monohull Beks are capable of traveling over 1,500 kilometers and carrying up to 2 tons of cargo. 2 versions have been presented. One is equipped with a machine gun mount and a target recognition auto-tracking system. The second is the Grad maritime platform with 10 MLRS charges.
Our drones have shifted the balance of power in the Black Sea and have proven their effectiveness. The new generation of Sea Baby is even more effective. Therefore, the work to clear the Black Sea of the Russian fleet will continue.
In addition, the upgraded drones are equipped with reinforced engines and a modern navigation system. Earlier, in June 2025, new models of maritime drones were used during the strike on the Crimean Bridge.
We approached by land, we approached across the water's surface. And in 2025, we approached underwater. There were 2 strikes, each with a force equivalent to 1.1 tons of TNT. As a result, its key supports, the so-called piers, were seriously damaged. Essentially, the bridge now operates with a load limit of no more than 5 tons, and when it failed in various ways. Trucks are moving across it. The enemy is not conducting any military logistics there.
Ukraine's allies are in no hurry when it comes to supplying long-range missiles that the armed forces of Ukraine could use to destroy legitimate military targets of the occupiers, deep in the Russian rear.
There's a story in the Wall Street Journal that says, the US has allegedly approved Ukraine's use of long-range missiles to strike deep inside Russia. Fake news. The US has nothing to do with these missiles.
Kyiv, in turn, has focused on producing a wide range of its own long-range missiles and drones, which are regularly used to strike Russian territory.
In general, it can be said that
It's a nightmare. It's really getting wild out here. As of today, Ukraine produces dozens of long-range missiles like the Long Neptune and Flamingo every month, as well as thousands of long-range and rocket-powered drones.
To put this war in a stalemate, to turn it around, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to strike at their logistics and aviation. That's why it's necessary to strike at the enterprises of Russia's military-industrial complex and its energy system.
Weapons manufacturers have not forgotten about the Ukrainian goddess of war either, Bodana. This year, Ukraine became the world leader in the production of self-propelled artillery systems. Artillery remains the queen, and Ukraine has mastered the production of howitzers. Despite the role of FPV drones on the front line, artillery has several advantages over drones. First, the range of engagement. For the Bodana, this figure reaches up to kilometers. Shells are cheap and immune to radio interference, and they are also extremely effective against enemy infantry.
In other words, these are actually completely different and distinct capabilities for striking both enemy personnel, enemy equipment, and the main points of permanent enemy deployment. If an FPV drone targets a single objective that is a specific serviceman, then accordingly its capability is limited. The Bodana self-propelled artillery system works over an area. In other words, it is what counters the so-called local assaults by Russian occupiers.
A protracted war and heavy defense require quick and effective solutions from Ukrainian military engineers. While Russian occupiers continue to dream of demilitarization, Ukraine is gradually becoming the world's largest weapons forge. A sensation, HIMARS has demonstrated its full striking power for the first time. These scenes of the occupiers' defeat in Donbas are stunning. Enemy columns have been destroyed. Their forces are literally falling apart before our eyes. Our forces have delivered a strategic strike. The ruthless meat grinder mode is on. And that's not all. The real hell is just beginning. A new deadly giant is entering the battlefield. When it goes into action, Dobropilia falls silent in anticipation of the spectacle. Who is this terrifying beast, and how is it changing the course of the battle right now? All the details are coming up in the report. It quickly reaches the firing position and is ready to deliver a deadly strike in just seconds. Everyone has heard about their work, and we've seen videos of their spectacular hits more than once. It was this very equipment that, during the counteroffensive, helped us destroy Russians both in the Kharkiv and Kherson regions. These are HIMARS, the already legendary HIMARS. Now they are operating here in Donetsk region, striking at enemy rear positions. These are unique shots. In 3 years of full-scale invasion, almost no one has ever filmed the work of the HIMARS. And no one has ever stood this close to such American multiple launch rocket systems. Meanwhile, the enemy is really feeling the heat from the HIMARS work. The chances of surviving its strike are almost zero. But today, the American multiple launch rocket system will target an enemy column. The Russians were advancing toward the Dobropilia direction with heavy equipment. The crew is already ready to strike. But suddenly, the order is called off. The HIMARS quickly leaves the field. Standing here like this is extremely dangerous. The enemy wouldn't even hesitate to use an Iskander on such a target. After a short pause, the crew receives new coordinates and returns to the firing position. So basically, they fired the HIMARS, you can't see it anymore, there's a smoke screen, and the rocket is already on its way to the occupiers' heads. The enemy column starts to burn, while the HIMARS crew rushes off to reload. Most people jokingly call the HIMARS a ghost of the front line. It fires quickly and disappears just as fast. This crew hasn't slept since 4 a.m. Reload, strike, and
once again, the cycle repeats itself, following the same familiar pattern as before. Each event leads into the next, creating a continuous loop that seems to have no true end. This ongoing process continues, with every step mirroring the last, always returning to the beginning and starting over, again and again.
17 armored vehicles, a tank, and more infantry on motorcycles. The Russians stubbornly keep pushing toward the Dobropilia direction. At the same time, they're being stopped by HIMARS, drone operators, and another American multiple launch rocket system. It's almost like a HIMARS, but it's on tracks and a bit older. This MLRS was developed back in the 1980s, but despite its age, it's maneuverable. And any other rocket system would envy its loudness. So the MLRS has special targets.
There were cannons, command posts, UAV control points, and infantry. There were bunkers, there were structures.
The enemy is also hunting the M270, just like the HIMARS. The MLRS can fire not only 227mm caliber rockets, but also send much more powerful ones at the enemy. For example, ATAK-MS. They can strike at several hundred kilometers.
We had them, we worked with them, and we used them quite often. I can't tell you about the targets, that's a question for the command. They are much more effective because you can hit targets on enemy territory, and the range is significantly increased. Plus, they are harder to shoot down or jam at the same time.
Few people ever see these crews, but they are always working on the hottest fronts. Rockets launched from HIMARS and M270s are among the most painful blows to the enemy. And as long as our partners keep supplying us with rockets without interruption, these MLRS are never idle. They never stand still.
Everything is done very quickly. On the Smerch, it takes about 20 to 25 minutes, but here, just 5 minutes. And the job is already being done. The rocket is already flying toward the enemy.
The soldiers themselves say that the appearance of such multiple launch rocket systems has significantly influenced the course of combat operations. The enemy can't feel safe, neither near the front line nor deep in the rear. It can reach anywhere. Anywhere at all. The main thing is the range of the rockets.
The longest ones have a range of about 500 kilometers, but we aren't given those.
But you'd like to have them?
Of course, then we could reach Moscow. Who wouldn't want that?
Ole Kornienko, Fox ITV, United News.
An unprecedented mobilization of allies. British troops are heading to Ukraine, and this seriously changes the balance of power. London has given a powerful boost. Ammunition is already at the front and reinforcements are arriving in waves. Ukrainian forces are preparing to crush the enemy, while Kremlin mercenaries can't keep up with the response. The West is watching Moscow with a keen eye, and the plan to finally limit the Kremlin's capabilities is already gaining momentum. All the details on this are coming up next.
London is already preparing for the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine in the event of a peace agreement between Kyiv and Moscow. This was stated by the UK Defence Minister John Healey. It is also reported that the United Kingdom is ready to allocate more than £100 million sterling, equivalent in Ukrainian hryvnias. This amount is more than 5.5 billion hryvnias for the possible deployment of its troops in
Ukraine. At this particular moment in time, I think that for now, it really feels like this is much more talk than actual action. There seems to be a lot of discussion, but not as much concrete movement or implementation happening just yet. Because if we recall what Emmanuel Macron initially said, what France was talking about sending troops. And in general, our idea was that this would happen during the full-scale war, but in order to help the Ukrainian army not to be deployed to areas where there are no active hostilities. This refers to the border with Transnistria and the border with the Republic of Belarus. If troops enter there, it will be presented as direct participation of European countries in the war.
Healey spoke about the efforts of the United Kingdom and France to form a coalition of the willing, consisting of 30 countries, which in the future is preparing to deploy forces on the territory of Ukraine. Well,
as for the principle that the Europeans promised from the very beginning, it's essentially to provide Ukraine as much as is absolutely needed and for as long as is needed and for as long as it takes. Unfortunately, as is sadly well known, and obviously for Ukrainians, this has not come true. And the saddest part of this story about the potential of this in Britain, a country in northwestern Europe, people are surrounded by a rich history, diverse culture, and long-standing traditions that have shaped the nation over time.
They are convinced that though sent to Ukraine, the forces will help ensure the security of the country's air and maritime space. The British minister's plan provides for the training of military personnel to participate in multinational forces that ensure the security of Ukraine's borders. However, this is only possible if Russia agrees to end the full-scale war.
When President Emmanuel Macron of France and Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, met together in London back in the month of August, their main objective was to gather as many supportive allies as possible, allies, friends, partners and supporters. And in the preamble of this important agreement, this significant accord, this collaborative initiative, some very, very key points and essential principles were outlined and emphasized. Deceptive and very dangerous words. That is to help either with concrete armed forces on the ground or with some other material assistance. And this, or unfortunately, this situation allows the vast majority of these European partners to express, without any doubt whatsoever, their support for Ukraine, for the Ukrainian people, and for Ukraine in its ongoing and difficult struggle. However, when it comes specifically to the issue of sending troops, when it comes to providing military assistance, and when it comes to direct involvement in the conflict itself, unfortunately, this situation allows them simply not to fulfill these obligations or responsibilities. So
in addition to post-war planning to help Ukrainians, Britain is also helping our country right now. Just this year, it was announced that the British have provided a record amount of aid totaling £4.5 billion sterling. And also together with the United States. The United Kingdom has shown leadership in coordinating a broader group of countries that are providing Kyiv with weapons and financial support. In September 2025, the United Kingdom provided Ukraine with military aid amounting to over $1.3 billion. These funds were allocated from frozen Russian assets. The government noted that this made it possible to supply hundreds of thousands of artillery shells, hundreds of air defense missiles, spare parts, and to sign new contracts for the maintenance and repair of equipment and vehicles.
Britain, which fully understands that after leaving the European Union, it needs to offer something that will allow it to return to the global game. And essentially, by helping Ukraine, this brings the United Kingdom back onto the list of global players, which is exactly what it wants. And that's why even something as simple as them more demonstratively lifting restrictions on the use of their military and reallocating it to Ukraine, this too, in my opinion, is an argument in favor of Britain's growing role in global politics. And that the war in Ukraine in this conflict will not only be Ukraine's war, but it will be a war also for Great Britain, which Britain understands perfectly well.
This Friday, October 24th, a meeting of the Coalition of the Resolute will take place in the capital of Great Britain, London. Preliminarily, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is also expected to join. That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo, with you. Even more scorching news in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you